Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, this is Jeremy Smith. Last time, guys, we were downtown at sunset and we were looking at the new Canon 5DSR. And of course, I couldn't help but tease you guys a little bit with the new Sony as well. Today, though, the time has finally come. Yes, I promise I'll try to stay still and contain a little bit of the excitement. But the day has finally come for us to start to talk about the new Sony A7RII Mark II as well. Now, later in this video, I will be sharing with you guys some of the photographs that I shot with the A7R II side by side with the 5DSR and the Nikon D810. And if you guys remember, I used the same Sigma 24mm 1.4 lens on all those cameras. Whenever we start thinking about the A7R Mark II though, wow, it has so many great specs. It wasn't that long ago that mirrorless cameras were seen as more of a novelty. They were not something that was really at the forefront of any advanced amateur or professional photographer's brain. But now with the A7R Mark II, we have a camera that pretty much changes that. With the A7R II, we have a new 42 megapixel backside illuminated full frame CMOS sensor. Now, in the past, backside illuminated technology has only been used for smaller sensors, like 1-inch sensors and 1 and 2.3 inch sensors and that sort of thing. But with this sensor, it makes sense to use it as well because even though it's full frame, it's now 42 megapixels, so we have a pretty high pixel density. The BSI technology on this sensor allows us to have very, very good dynamic range, and it also allows us to have exceptional low light performance in addition to high resolution. So it's like having your cake and eating it too. It's truly awesome, as you guys will see in the samples later on. With BSI technology, basically they take all that readout circuitry that's normally found on the front of the sensor, they put it on the back side of the sensor, so that way it's not impeding the flow of light into the camera, so it works out very, very well. With the A7R II, we do see an update to its control system. It does have a locking mode dial, just like a lot of the new Nikon and Canon DSLRs that have come out, so that's welcome. One thing that is more advanced on a mirrorless camera than what we've seen on DSLRs is that there's just a plethora of custom function controls. And this is something that I wish Nikon and Canon would implement as well on their cameras. But yeah, pretty much anything on this camera can be customized. It has a total of 4 custom function buttons. It also gives us the ability to be able to customize its multi-direction button on the back. So you can customize left, right, up, down. You can even customize the center function button. And that's just incredible. Just about anything can be customized, and you're actually not limited a whole lot in what you can program. So there's a whole range of options that can be programmed to that dial. This camera does have the same types of inputs that we'd expect. It does give us a microphone jack and a headphone jack. We also have a micro HDMI and a micro USB as well. Now, just like on the RX100 Mark IV that we tested, the micro USB connection can be used to charge the camera while you actually have it in use. So that's something very, very nice. And believe me guys, you will need it because battery life on mirrorless cameras is still not the best. You're still only going to get about 200 or 300 shots per charge. Sony, they do include 2 batteries with this camera, and they include the plug-in charger in addition to the USB charger, so that's a nice touch. But definitely keep in mind that you're going to have to be near some battery power. This camera does have something called iStart autofocus, which I find very, very interesting. It basically automatically finds the closest eye of your subject, and it's very, very accurate. I've had about a 90% hit rate with it so far. We had a photo expo not long ago, and I shot some models using this camera, and I got very, very good results with that too. So very, very awesome feature. It doesn't work with third-party lenses, although if you guys have seen my recent video where I tested this camera with the Canon 17-40, you'll realize that the focus performance, even with third-party lenses, is phenomenal. We'll go ahead and take a look at the samples that I shot downtown, and I'll give you guys a few more technical details, and of course I will be putting those photos in the description for you guys to take a look as well. Okay, so taking a quick look at these images side by side, you guys recognize the test scene. Now, I will go ahead and point out one thing. Not long after I did this these sample photos and everything, Sony announced that they were coming out with a new firmware update, which actually allowed for uncompressed RAW files out of the A7R II, so that way you could get the full 14 bits. Now, instead of going back and redoing this entire test using the new firmware, I decided to just press on as we were. But in the future, I will be doing some additional samples, and I'll make another little video to talk about how this camera compares in the 14-bit uncompressed mode versus the current lossy compressed 12-bit mode that I was using with the camera that I tested during this review. I don't expect it to change things a whole lot in everyday sort of situations, but anyways, we'll get to that in a future video. As you guys notice, there is pretty much the exact same exposure settings used between the cameras. Now, there's a slight variations here and there because, as we discussed before, the tone curve out of the Canon RAW files is pretty contrasty, you know? A lot of people in the comments on my 5DSR video were asking me, you know, if I was using the latest version of Lightroom and things like that. And yes, I am using the latest version of Lightroom. Basically what it comes down to is, guys, the camera manufacturers are not really truthful oftentimes about their ISO ratings, for one. And the other thing is, the cameras, just because we're shooting in RAW, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have a very raw file. I mean, a lot of cameras do use quite a bit of processing to their RAW files. That's why Sony released their new update for the A7R II. And it's apparent that on the Canon, it just has a very steep tone curve out of camera. Anyways, doesn't really matter a whole lot at the end of the day for what we're testing. If you take a look at this, let's see here, they're both shot. Both these shots are pretty close to the same exposure here. As you can realize here, you know, we have a lot of fine detail with both cameras. Now, I'm not going to spend just a ton of time with this because ultimately, I feel like image quality, even though I can show you guys the differences, I feel like image quality is going to be subjective with certain viewers. Like, for example, some people are going to very much care about high ISO. Some people are not going to care. Some people are going to want the finest detail, etc. I'm not going to tell you which is better or which is worse. My goal is to show you what both cameras can do, and then you can come to your own conclusions. But yeah, the difference in resolution, 42 megapixels on the Sony, 50 megapixels on the Canon, they're both very good. No optical low-pass filters, so of course there's lots of fine detail being recorded. To kind of recap on how the tests were conducted, both cameras were manually focused using live view, and they were manually focused in the exact same spot, which was on this building right here. And every shot was shot as close to the same as possible. So yeah, focusing right here at f8, there should be plenty of depth of field. I didn't want to shoot past f8 because we start to run into diffraction, especially on the Canon. Let's see, if we compare with the Nikon here, the Nikon D810, we've got the Sony here on the left, Nikon on the right. The Nikon RAW files are just very flat out of camera. The Canons are very contrasty, the Nikons are very flat, and the Sonys are kind of in between. Let's see, let's go over here and take a closer look, shall we? And yeah, you can definitely see that the Sony is recording a lot more fine detail here. It's pretty apparent in this shot, especially. If you look at the closer details here on the railing around the balconies, you can see a lot more fine detail in the Sony files. Notice that you can actually read a lot of the text on the buildings here, whereas on the Nikon, things are kind of muddy. Both cameras have some more array there, visible. All in all, though, the thing I want you guys to realize is that all three of these cameras do an exceptional job at recording detail. They all do a very good job of doing what they're designed to do. If you look at some high ISO shots here, let's see, let's just grab those. Okay, so 6400 ISO. It had obviously got much, much darker at this point. My main interest of comparison here is between the Canon and the Sony because they're both very similar in resolution. Let's see, of course, this is at 2:1, very close. The thing that I'll say is all these cameras, even at high ISO, they still produce a lot of detail. And of course, whenever you start talking about this much detail, it is possible to use noise reduction more effectively as well. Interesting thing, I've actually started personally not using a lot of noise reduction these days because of high resolution files. Very rare do I actually have to output a file at its full resolution that's shot at high ISO. Usually it's for a relatively small size display of some sort, like on a website or a smaller print. And if something like that's going to happen, then the image is going to be downsampled dramatically anyway, and I don't really have to worry a whole lot about noise reduction. But yeah, you guys, you can see that definitely there's finer detail on the Sony. Not really a big surprise there. But I don't think it's a deal breaker either way. They both look really good. Let's compare with our Nikon here and see how things go. If I can find the right file here. There we go. 1/1000th of a second at f8, 6400 ISO. As I mentioned before, you can still see the differences in. In the in the tone curve on both cameras. And yes, we did accidentally set the clock on the Sony wrong. It's supposed to be 8:03 p.m. as opposed to a.m. But you can see captured practically at the same time there. Of course, there is a lot of difference in terms of the tone curve between these two cameras. But to my eye, at least, the amount of noise in both photographs looks pretty much the same. They both look pretty good. I mean, I would say that the noise is equal. So, I mean, I'm not seeing anything dramatically different there. If you like to have a very malleable file, there is something to be said for the Nikon files because they're very flat out of camera, as you can see. And so you can really massage the file a lot more. Whenever you start with something that's not very contrasty, you can really go in and adjust your tone curve a lot more to your liking. I'll be very, very interested to see in the future how the Sony does once I install the new firmware update and do the same test again. So definitely be on the lookout for that. Be sure to subscribe. I am going to be posting these photographs on Flickr as usual, and I'll put the link in the description below, so definitely feel free to take a look and, of course, come to your own conclusions, because as I mentioned before, all these cameras are absolutely phenomenal. Things like the autofocus ability and the lens selection and battery life and just ergonomics in general, those things are going to make a much bigger difference whenever you are choosing between these three cameras, so keep that in mind. If you have any questions, write me in the comments below. And of course, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, this is Jeremy Smith, signing off.